Today is Goose's first ride. I go through my groundwork, and you can see with the whip, my desensitizing, she's right on my shoulder. She's very confident. She's not worried about any of the tools that I use. And I introduced this by just walking away while I swing it around. You see she's right on my shoulder. She wants to stay right with me, and she's not bothered by it. I've already gone through the Jeffries method, being on her back, laying across her, and rubbing her all over. And now I'm passing the rope behind my saddle and clucking at her to encourage her to move her feet and follow her nose through a turn. This will help when I'm on her back so that when she hears me cluck at her, she has a little more understanding and doesn't lock up when I draw her nose around and encourage her to move her feet. I do this from both sides. I did it several times on both sides. See, she got a little bit stuck, and I just waited on her, and she follows through and walks right over. Now I am grabbing the horn. I'm going to rock the saddle back and forth and pull and push on it a little bit, and this will encourage the horse to square their feet up and kind of prepares them for what it's going to feel like when you put your foot in the stirrup to actually get up into the saddle. And so I always bounce a few times, and before I got to this point, I stuck my foot in the stirrup and bounced on the ground a couple of times, and jumped just a little, and then hopped right back down. I do all of this in little stages so that when I go to get up, it's not really a big deal yet. And when I lean over the saddle like this, I have my knee bent and I keep my hips low right against the saddle. That keeps my center of gravity low and makes it very easy to get back down if anything were to go wrong. However, I don't get to this point and start stepping up into the saddle until I'm really sure it's going to go well. There's always a chance it can go wrong, but I'm usually pretty confident by this time that this is going to be a good lesson for the horse. One thing that's really important is you don't want to try to get a first ride on a colt on a day that you feel rushed. If you have a time limit, it's probably not in their best interest or yours to try to do your first ride. Wait till you have a lot of free time or a lazy day and tinker with it. And so there you see I got on and I rubbed her for a second and I get right back off. Just like when I worked with the saddle or anything else, I try the first time I throw anything on their back to get it off of them before they have a chance to feel worried. And I switch sides and I'm going to flap that stirrup around. I pat on the saddle and just wiggle everything around. I step up again, and as soon as I get up on their back, I want to rub their neck a lot and try and make sure they're not too worried. I'm actually going to pick up my right stirrup this time. I just barely have my toes in those stirrups. And I have crooked stirrups, and they're the wide roper style. Whenever I'm riding, I want to feel like if I pick my foot up, all I have to do is pick it up and the stirrup will fall right off of my foot. If I can't dump my stirrups, I don't ride in them. I always ride with roper styles. And the same thing, I got up there for a minute, waited, and then got right back down. And when I'm introducing stuff like this, I do a lot of getting up on her back and then stepping away and kind of drawing her to me. I just walked off the other way and waited on her. And I like how she approaches. She'll come up and then she'll stop just a little ways away. I don't mind taking a step or two towards my horse when I draw them to me. I would rather do that than have them trying to push on me when they approach me. She's such a sweet mare. And right there, I took a little contact and asked her to flex and give me her face, and she brought her head right around really nicely and soft. And once again, I keep my knee bent and then swing a leg over. And I move a lot during my first rides early on. Those first few weeks, I really want to move around, and I want that horse to not be worried by anything touching them on the neck or on their sides. I'll hold on to the tail end of my rope and rub that all over her. And then ask her to flex here, and she does really soft. And I'm going to start moving my legs around. This early, I really don't try to get them to move forward off of a leg cue. I just keep moving my legs because I don't want them to be worried over anything touching their sides. I want her to be okay with my legs moving, so instead of really trying to squeeze her forward or kick her, I'm going to bump my legs around a little bit, but I'm mostly going to cluck at her. And then I'll use the tail end of my rope and just barely swing it back and forth so it just barely bumps her on the shoulder or on the hip. And that just causes enough energy and enough movement to encourage her to move around a little bit. Because I have her head tipped to the side, I'm going to bump her opposite shoulder to encourage her to move her shoulder across and start into a little bit of a turn. And as long as they'll be soft and follow that little bit of a feel to the side, then I'll let them straighten out when they start moving their feet. And I only let them go a few steps, and then I'll ask them to turn a little bit again. You see here, I'm going to use that rope, and I'm just barely flopping it back and forth. It's just enough that it's bumping against her shoulder and against her side. Anytime I feel her think about move, I stop moving my rope and I'll rub her with it. I don't want her to be worried about that rope. I just want her to respect the fact that I'm asking her to do something. So if she thinks about trying to do the right thing, then I'm going to stop applying that pressure for a minute, and I'm going to rub her and let her know she's good, like right there. And she had gone up to the fence and she turned the opposite way. One or two times of that I don't really worry about. And she offered to stop there, and I'm okay with that too. You see right there, I swung the rope over her head. And I'm going to tip her nose to the right. And now the tail of my rope is on her left side. I'm going to ask her for a little bit of a bend. And I cluck at her to move her feet. And I toss the rope to the other side. I typically don't tie my rope around my halter and make a set of reins in my first ride because I don't want to be too tempted to try to grab both reins. If anything were to happen, I'm just better off being able to pull her head to one side. A lot of times, no matter how much you've worked on colts or worked on horses, if you have both reins, when things go wrong, it's easy to accidentally snatch up both sides of their face, and you don't want to do that because that just ends up making it worse. And now I'm going to be guiding her just a little bit. When she starts to turn to the left or the right, as she gets to the fence, I'm going to encourage her to stay on that same path, only because I don't want her to learn how to go to the fence and abruptly change directions. When they get a little waspy like that, it can be kind of difficult to get them out of it. And so I don't want her to ever develop that habit. So it's just going to be a little pressure, ask her to stay on the same circle, and once she's going around, I'll leave her alone. So right there, asking her to the left, follow your nose, and she does really well. And I'm never really in a hurry during a first ride to try and get the horse moving much more than a walk. Depending on the horse, some of them will progress to a trot pretty quickly. And this little mare has just been doing so good. I don't want to overload her brain. I want my first ride to be as calm and relaxed as possible. And if you push a horse too fast, even though she could have probably handled it, you run the risk of making it an unpleasant experience, and I definitely don't want that. I want all of these to be good. And so there, once again, I just flop the rein against her neck a little bit, or the tail of my rope, excuse me, and just ask her to turn a little, because I've got to encourage that shoulder to move across to start those feet moving. And so at this point, I have her moving forward really well, and she's following her nose off of a really, really light feel. She's very soft. And she's given me a turn in both directions. She has stopped a few times. So I'm going to throw the rope to the other side of her head. And at this point, even though she's been so good about it, I'm going to go ahead and toss that rope back and forth a little. I want to make sure that she's in no way worried about that swinging around her head, and it's brushing her ears and rubbing against the side of her face as it comes around, and it's touching her nose, all of that. I'm really liking how quiet she's staying. And so I'm going to get off and undo my cinches, and I'm going to yank that saddle off and set it right in front of her. First rides, I want them to be very short, very calm, and when I get off, it is a complete release of pressure. I want to get that saddle off as fast as possible, and I'll step away and let her look it all over. She has seen that saddle so many times by now, and I still want to put it in front of her and let her play with it and chew on it if she wants or anything else. It's definitely her time to just relax at this point. And this little horse has been so great to work with. You can see the two horses in the arena. They just arrived here today, and so they're new, and it's very easy for a colt to get distracted. And you'll see in a second when I step off to the side and cluck at her, she doesn't even bother going over to see those horses. She'll leave the saddle, come see me. She's just a great little horse.